Hello, everybody. We have finally made it. Today is my Overwatch League Season 2, Stage 1, Week 1 preview video. Some of this video just me explaining what this series will be for each week. But we're here. We're finally at Overwatch League Season 2 starting week. It feels like it's been forever since the World Cup, and especially feels like it's been forever since the end of Season 1, but finally we have made it. So, this series is going to be me talking about the weeks before they happen, usually on Mondays, but sometimes it'll be on a Friday if the stage or that week is late enough, if it starts on Saturday, basically. So you can expect stuff like that. I'll be looking, like I said, at the week to come, as well as the week that has just passed. So that's really the basics of it. And you'll see when I start getting into this a little bit more, but I'll give my thoughts on everything. And then when I give my predictions and talking about the week to come, I'll give my picks as well as my big pick, which is basically each day. There's multiple games each day. Each day I pick one game that I will basically pick as my main pick for that week or for that day, and I'll be keeping an overall record for my major pick as well as for my just normal picks. I'll keep both of those. But for the most part, I'll be trying to focus on my really major picks for each week. So, I know it's Monday, and the season doesn't start until Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, February 14th, of course. But yeah, I'm excited to finally see the start of Overwatch League Season 2. So, let's cover a couple things about what's been going on. So this past weekend, these past couple days we had, the 9th and the 10th of February, we had the Community Countdown, which originally started out as scrims and then became mystery heroes because teams weren't trying enough. I'll have a video where I talk more about the Community Countdown coming out on Friday. But for now, so we saw some stuff. We got to see some teams play and whatnot. There have been some updates, some changes to some of the teams. I thought I'd cover that a little bit. But in general, the Community Countdown was a good way for us to kind of get our first looks at some of these teams. The expansion teams primarily, some of the new players, all that kind of stuff. The Shanghai Dragons got their first win. Granted, it was Mystery Heroes in preseason. It didn't really matter, but they got their first win, so that's always nice. So, some stuff went on. But let's talk about some of the things that have changed, some of the things that will be impacting some of these teams that has come out in this past week. The first thing, the biggest thing, has to do with the Shanghai Dragons. They tweeted out the other day about Fearless, their main tank player, and that he will not be playing for the first stage, most likely, or at least he won't be playing for a little while early in the season, and I will read you their tweet longer that they posted. Fearless has reached out to the team for permission to recuperate at home in Korea, noting that with his current health condition, it is difficult for him to keep up with the team's training schedule. After careful consideration, the Dragons management team has now approved Fearless's request, allowing him to rest up in Korea. The main tank position will be covered by other players on the team during this time. The whole team is practicing hard to prepare for the upcoming matches, and all members of the Shanghai Dragons sincerely hope that Fearless will get well soon. Now, if you know anything about the Shanghai Dragons, you will know that they don't actually have another main tank player on their roster. So they will be without a main tank for X amount of time. We don't actually know how long they will be without a main tank player, but it looks to me like they will be putting Gregory or Guardian on that tank role. I really hope it's not Gregory because she is probably their best she's definitely their best flex tank. I mean, they could put a DPS player because they have 4 DPS players, so they have enough DPS players that if they have one that they feel comfortable enough putting them on tank, they could always do that. Who knows who they're going to start, but that's just something I want to make note of, is that that is something to keep your eyes on, because the Shanghai Dragons will be impacted by the fact that they really can't play their main tank player for the start of this season. We'll see how long he's out, but that's a big thing. The other thing comes from the Atlanta Reign, who have actually made a roster addition a few days before the season started, and they have added Dogman from ATL Academy, the Atlanta Reign Academy team. So he is now on their main roster. He's a support player, off support specifically. So that is where things stand with updates that I saw or found that were noticeable. I'm sorry, I bumped the mic a little bit there. So those are the major changes that have happened this past week, things that we know about that have gone on. What does that mean for the games coming up in week 1? So my picks that should be showing up on the screen now. I figure I should go a little bit into the coding, what it all means. So if you look at the Thursday, February 14th games, that's the first slate of games, so I'll start with those. You'll notice, one, obviously the teams are all color-coded and named, so they're easy to tell the teams just by kind of looking, and you don't have to go through each team, hopefully, just be able to look for the color. But you'll see that there are some teams that are bolded and underlined, some teams are italics, some teams are italics and bold and underlined, some have nothing. What does that mean? So the bold and underlined means that I predict that team to win. The italics means that that game is my big pick game. So notice that the italics is always two teams next to each other. So that is how you can tell what my combination is. So I'll talk about most of these games. I'll run through my picks. I'll say who I'm picking. I might not talk about each game in detail, but I'll definitely try to spend time on the big pick games to really go into detail onto those. And the big pick game isn't going to necessarily be the game that I think is going to be the best game of that day. I'm also going to avoid picking games where it's like the team that's the best in the league or it's the worst in the league, and then that's my record. So I'm like making my record really good. I'm going to try to make it so it's multiple games that are somewhat challenging each time around. Close games, good games, stuff like that. Games that I expect to be pretty good. So that is what the deal is there. So let's run down my picks for week 1. Specifically, go over my big picks for week 1, and then I'll give some closing statements, and then that'll be it. So for Thursday, February 14th, there are 4 games. We have the Philadelphia Fusion taking on the London Spitfire. That is game 1, first game of the season. That is my big pick game. I'll get back to that one in a second. The New York Excelsior taking on the Boston Uprising. I am picking the New York Excelsior. I just think they're a better team. Boston Uprising look kind of weak this season, in my opinion, so I'm taking the Excelsior for that reason. Seoul Dynasty versus LA Gladiators. This game is a very close game for me. Could be a big pick game for me. Is very close to being a big pick game for me, but ultimately I'm going with the Dynasty for one major reason, and that is if you look at our good old friend Fisher, last season played for the Gladiators, but originally played for the London Spitfire. When he went to the Gladiators, he never lost a game to the Spitfire. So something that I feel, it's not a perfect translation, but that is helpful, and that gives you insight into a team and the way they play. And I like the Seoul Dynasty a lot. I really think they're a really solid team, so I'm taking them over the Gladiators. The Shanghai Dragons against the Hangzhou Spark. I originally had the Dragons winning this game, but without Fearless, I can't in good conscience pick a team that really won't have their main player on one of the most important roles. I have to pick against the Dragons for that reason. Picking the Spark over the Dragons there. For my big pick game for that day, The Fusion versus the London Spitfire. This is a really tough game. These are like two of the best three teams in the league. Philadelphia, of course, lost to London Spitfire in the Season 1 Grand Finals. They want to come back. They want to prove something. They want to prove that they're still a really solid team. Ultimately, I'm taking London, though, because, one, they won the last time they met, even though ultimately Philadelphia had more wins against them throughout the season, if my memory serves me correctly. So that's part one. Number two, the thing that I really kind of want to put a little bit more into is the London Spitfire have a new coach. So the team is probably going to be different in the way that they operate. So they come out in a way where they kind of have some surprises that the Philadelphia Fusion probably won't know what to expect, and the Fusion are pretty much the same team. So that's why I like the Spitfire in this game. That's why I'm taking them. That's my picks for day one, Thursday, February 14th. For the Friday games, we start off with a game between the Toronto Defiant and the Houston Outlaws. I'm taking Houston Outlaws. I like the Houston Outlaws. Defiant are missing Neko, one of the most important parts on that team. That's a huge loss to have, so I think Outlaws win that game pretty easily. Next, I have the Atlanta Reign and the Florida Mayhem. I'm taking the Atlanta Reign. I was actually impressed with the Atlanta Reign, as much as it doesn't really matter, because the community countdown is, free. There is, Mr. Heroes, even though that game they played wasn't Mr. Heroes. They played against... who did they play against? They played against Boston. So a team that I'm not crazy about, but I think Boston's a little bit better than Florida, and I thought that Atlanta looks pretty good. So I'm going to rock with Atlanta. I think they get the win against Florida, but I think it'll be pretty close. Next, we have San Francisco Shock against Dallas Fuel. Another game I really wanted to make a big pick game, but I didn't pick it for a reason. I'll get into that reason when I get to the actual big pick game, but I have the San Francisco Shock beating the Dallas Fuel. I really like the Shock. I think they have a lot of tricks up their sleeves. I think they look really good. Dallas Fuel, I'm still not 100% sold on. I think they're a good team, but I'm not 100% sold on them because they struggled for the majority of the season in Season 1. I need to see more out of them before I'm ready to start getting on their bandwagon, so I'm going to take the Shock for this game. My big pick game for Friday is the Chengdu Hunters versus the Guangzhou Charge. This is my big pick game because it's the only game in the first 2 days, and I believe it's the only game the entire first week between two expansion teams. So I wanted to pick a game between two expansion teams. I really like both of these teams' chances against each other because I think Chengdu at least has that language thing, whereas I don't really think language is that big of an issue. I don't think communications are that bad. I think these two teams are both going to be interesting to see for the first time on this stage, but I like what Guangzhou has better. I like the talent they have a little bit more. I think Bacon Jack is a very good player, but the Hunters don't have Yang Xiaolong at the moment. At least I don't believe he's gotten in the country yet. I haven't seen any updates that he has. Guangzhou Charge have some very solid players. Specifically their DPS. I really like their DPS line. So I'm going to take the Guangzhou Charge. I think they're a better team overall, too. So that's my big pick for Friday. Saturday, the London Spitfire are back in action, taking on the Paris Eternal. That's the Paris Eternal's first game. And while I like the Paris Eternal, I think they're a good team. I think the London Spitfire, still very good. And I think they're going to take another win there against Paris. Next is the Washington Justice against the New York Excelsior. I'm taking the NYXL. I think the NYXL are just a better team. Washington Justice a little weak. I'm taking the NYXL for that reason. The Los Angeles Valiant against the Hangzhou Spark. I really like the Hangzhou Spark, but the Valiant were really good last season. I think you give them a little bit more time to prepare for the Spark than the Spark have to prepare for them, realistically. Right, the Valiant don't play any games before then. That, to me, gives the Valiant a huge advantage to prepare more. And they get to see the Spark take on the Dragons, and they can prep more for that in that way. So that for me is very clear why the Valiant win this game. I think they have more. Everything just goes in their favor for this game, and they're more experienced. Taking the Valiant against the Spark. The Titans against the Dragons is my big pick game for Saturday, and the main reason why is because this is a rematch pretty much of the Overwatch Contenders Korea Season 2 Grand Finals, or the finals between Runaway and Kongdu Panthera. A large portion of this Kongdu Panthera roster is now on the Shanghai Dragons, and the entirety of that Runaway roster is on the Vancouver Titans. Um, I expected this game to be a lot closer when Fearless was playing, but I want to keep this game here. I think it's going to be a really good game. At the end of the day, I really like both of these teams, but Shanghai not having that main tank is really detrimental to their ability to go out and play the way they want to. So I'm going to take the Vancouver Titans. You also, they don't play a game before that, so when that's the game you get to prepare for, you once again get to see the Dragons take on an opponent. That's something that really, really helps. So I'm taking the Titans for that reason as well. Unfortunately, the Dragons will probably go the first week without getting a win. But what can you do? Sometimes you win. But for the Shanghai Dragons, you usually just lose. But hey, their next game after that is against the Boston Uprising, and I think they got a good chance to win that game. And then they'll play the Chengdu Hunters. So we'll get to see Shanghai. They'll get a win in the first 2 weeks. I believe that. Let's go into Sunday, the final day. We'll start with the game between the Outlaws of Houston and the Boston Uprising. I have the Houston Outlaws winning this one. I'm really not crazy about the Boston Uprising this season. I've made that very clear. I think the Houston Outlaws are underrated this season. I don't think people are praising them, or at least not praising them, or talking about them as much as I think they should. So I like the Houston Outlaws. I have them taking the win against the Boston Uprising. Next is the Philadelphia Fusion taking on the Atlanta Reign. Both teams, relatively long break. The Fusion play Thursday, the Reign play Friday, then neither team plays again until Sunday, so they have a little bit of time. The Fusion are just, in my opinion, a top 3 team, arguably even a top 2 team. They're very, very good. I think they're going to be a really hard team to beat in Stage 1 especially. I don't think the Reign are at that point where I can really say the Reign will be dominant against the Philadelphia Fusion. So this to me is an easy pick for the Fusion for that game. This week is, of course, very safe. You don't really know much of what's going on yet. You just kind of got to pick who you got to pick. We'll skip over the game between the Shock and the Gladiators for now to take a look at the game against the Seoul Dynasty and the Dallas Fuel. Another game I really like, and I also really wanted to pick as a big pick game, but I ultimately decided not to because I think the other one's going to be a little bit better, but I might be wrong. But I really, really, really like the Seoul Dynasty this season. I think they look much better than they did last season. From what I saw in them from the community countdown, they looked really, really good. Now, granted, it doesn't really matter. They were playing mystery heroes, so they were playing, as heroes that don't necessarily match what they will be playing in the actual season. But in general, I thought they still looked really, really good. The Dallas Fuel, I think they're going to be better than they were last season. I'm still have questions about them. I need to see them in action before I really jump on the bandwagon. A lot of people on my power rankings were saying the Dallas Fuel are going to be better than that 13 spot you have them in. And while I think they have the ability to be, you can't just discount the fact that they won 6 games in 30 games. They played 30 games, won 6, and then somehow managed to win 6 and 10 in the final stage because the meta was more in their favor. And maybe it was just that, or maybe it was the fact that some of the better teams were maybe not competing as hard, which I don't necessarily think is true, but I feel like Boston started to struggle and London didn't play super well, but it didn't really matter for them. Philadelphia didn't play great either. They scraped by, but, the Fuel are still a question mark to me, and I can't really say that I think they're going to be all that great yet. But the final game, my final big pick game, is the game between the San Francisco Shock and the Los Angeles Gladiators. I really like both of these teams. I think the Gladiators look like the best team in the Pacific. Even though I didn't pick them to beat Seoul, overall I really like the Gladiators. I think the Shock look good as well, but I think the Gladiators just look slightly better. So I'm taking the Gladiators in this game. I think it'll be a really good game. It'll be a really close game. But ultimately, I think the Gladiators have a better roster and more talent, though the Shock have more depth and kind of run a lot of tricky sets and tricky, not sets, tricky like combos and compositions that I'm really excited to see. So I'm very excited to see what both of these teams do in this game. But ultimately, I like the Gladiators more so than I like the Shock in that game. But that is everything I have, really. Hopefully, this show will get a little bit more polished. For whatever reason, today I feel very weird. Hopefully, things get a little bit better. But if you enjoyed this video, I hope that you consider liking and subscribing. It helps out. Let me know down below your thoughts on these games. If you want to give me all of your predictions, you want to give me just the big pick predictions. They are, of course, the game between the Philadelphia Fusion and London Spitfire, the Chengdu Hunters and Guangzhou Charge, Vancouver Titans versus Shanghai Dragons, and San Francisco Shock against the LA Gladiators. Those are my big pick games, the ones that I'm really putting my my big boy pants on the line for. So that's everything I have for you. If you yeah, I was just about to run through the outro again, but I did the outro or the plug. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next video. I'm going to try to keep these videos hopefully in the 20 to 25 minute range. That's my hope. So far, so good, but it's the first one, so we'll see. But thank you anyway. I'll see you all next time. Bye.